Or is that a weakness that can be overcome? Story 1. Workplace toxicity is pretty well documented as a real thing that impacts workers' mental health. I have had a few unhealthy work environments, and when I left them, I felt better. I have been in my current role for over 5 years, and I really enjoy the work. Mainly, the boss I have is great and the work culture is pretty good. Story 2. Definitely. I'm currently employed in a place where the workload is good, but the people are toxic. Lots of gossiping, grandstanding, and backstabbing. I was hired 2 years ago on verbal agreements regarding position and compensation that are still not fulfilled. Lesson learned. Always, always, always get it in writing. Story 3. When I worked in a liquor store, every day on my way to work, I would pray to get into a car accident. I wanted to experience physical injury to take away from my mental anguish. I also thought that if I could get into a car accident that wasn't my fault, I could get some insurance money and wouldn't have to work for a while. Mental health can be greatly affected by your occupation. Story 4. I am currently in a clean room doing nothing but browsing my phone and checking in on small duties every 5 minutes. I get up to walk a few feet every so often. I am here for 12 hours. My long weekends, 3 to 4 days, are nice, but I am absolutely miserable and would rather work anywhere else. I am looking into new jobs in food and drink service to keep me on my feet and socially active. I would rather take the pay cut than be in mental anguish all day. Story 5. So, over the last year, I have slowly been given the job responsibilities of 4 positions. On top of that, we were almost forced to go to a new building 2 hours further away. Also, I am on call literally half the time. They recently messed up the on-call list to change on the weekends instead of Monday. So now I am on call at least 1 day every single weekend. I hate my job. Story 6. I hurt my shoulder, and everyone turned on me. People were saying I was faking and stuff like that. I was pretty much getting bullied. People started calling me Gimpy Bird, and they would come up to me and aggressively ask when I would be better. Then they would be like, "It's been a month already. I tore something in my shoulder, and it's not going to get better without surgery." I hated going into work. I hate everybody there still. I almost walked out a few times, but that would have messed me over a lot. I was ready to snap at any moment. My personal life was bad with my girlfriend. It's terrible how much it can affect you. Story 7. I've recently left my job. I decided on a moment's notice and immediately felt better for it. I don't see it as a weakness, and I've worked in some challenging environments including the military, but this job just killed me. Story 8. It can definitely be, and you should not underestimate the risks of mental exhaustion. Exploiting yourself for people who do not appreciate it, or for a cause that does not give anything back, will lead you to a very bad place, and you should know when to stop to prevent yourself from going there. Story 9. I dreaded going to work at the hospital I worked at last year. I hated the work environment so much I would literally scream and curse in my car just to prepare for the day. I had coworkers who were looking for things to get me in trouble, some who never helped even if it was their job to, and administration always looking over my shoulder and just nitpicking everything I was doing wrong while not commending me on the things I was doing right or improving on. My boss would always call me into her office and tell me I was one mistake away from being fired, but somehow turn it around and say she was being kind to me because I wouldn't succeed in other hospitals. I mean, I get it, I am still learning, but that is just not a good way to motivate someone. I quit after 6 months because I was too stressed and depressed to continue. It was not worth it. Story 10. I was working at a manufacturing plant and got offered a supervisor position. I was qualified but didn't really want it. I took it anyway to give it a shot. Horrible mistake. The added demand of having to deal with people's drama at work, managing the work assignments and deadlines combined with a schedule change from a normal Monday to Friday to a condensed workweek shift that meant I was working every other weekend for no extra pay made me miserable. I was coming home every day with stress headaches and couldn't enjoy my life outside of work. It lasted about 5 months until I found a job where I was back on the tools again, mostly working by myself, and was much happier. Story 11. Yes, it can. A lot of it depends on your manager and the company. I once had a sales job in an office and my manager was the worst, and so was the company because they allowed that to happen. She had just been promoted to manager level, therefore she had this feeling of power, and she got a kick out of barking orders and humiliating employees. She once even got on to me for not following one of her orders right away that was sent in an email at 7 p.m. I tried to bear with it solely out of fear of being unemployed, but I let it get to the best of me and eventually got let go due to underperformance. It was nearly impossible to meet the company's goals they had given to us. Trying to deal with it was a mistake, as no one seemed to want to hire me after they asked the question, "What was your reason for leaving?" Although it was barely in my control since the environment was so toxic. On the bright side, I found out shortly after I left that she had gotten fired, so I was quite happy to see that karma kick in. Story 12. Yes, it can be bad enough for it to affect mental health. I quit my job flat out last year because my boss was a terrible human being, human resources did nothing, and the director was in another state. I didn't sleep thinking about work, showered stressing about work, and argued with the boss constantly. We were a team of two, and he still managed to do nothing. I walked into a meeting both he and the director were in and told them that I loved the job, loved the people around me, and thought the most recent review I received was fair. That I was quitting for one reason and one reason only, that boss. I never looked back and never regretted it. Story 13. My last workplace is the reason I deal with anxiety and depression now. Stressful clients plus horrible upper management meant we took all the blame from both sides when anything went wrong. We also didn't have the tools to do our jobs 90% of the time. I should have left before I did, as I wasn't being paid well, but I needed health insurance. Story 14. I don't think it's healthy to think of not being able to tough out a bad workplace as a weakness. That's how terrible managers and executives get by with being awful people, because people make excuses that those who leave just aren't tough enough to get through it. The managers and executives get to keep being terrible people. If your workplace is bad, leaving is you standing up for yourself and saying that you're not going to put up with their nonsense, and that's not weakness. With that, my last workplace was pretty bad. It was a medical records company, and I started as a data entry person. I quickly learned the ropes and became the person to whom everyone went to get answers. I learned about compliance programs and asked our chief executive officer, CEO, about them, and it turns out that compliance was her least favorite kind of work. So I was saddled with it. I had two things going on. First was the general workplace. Our turnover was amazing. You couldn't depend on anyone being there for 6 months, especially if they answered to the CEO. So you were always under pressure. Meanwhile, the more I got into my compliance program while the CEO put me in it, the more she would lash out at me about her problems with the rules I had to have us follow. Along the way, Jocelyn Samuels, the head of the United States Department of Health and Human Services, HHS under Obama, became my girlfriend. And when I had to talk rules out with them, they would basically press as hard as they could to bend them. Then there was the job itself. We sent medical records everywhere, and things would end up in the wrong spot. Half my job was chasing people down for confidentiality statements so we wouldn't have to file them as breaches. I spent most of my time apologizing to people for mistakes I didn't make, basically bargaining with people to try to get statements, or otherwise being threatened to be sued time and again. Meanwhile, because the CEO wasn't experiencing this directly, she was emboldened. I kept getting big pay raises because no one wanted to do my job, and they were afraid I would walk. I eventually found a place that paid $25,000 per year more, was close to family, and had an extensive code of ethics. At my new job, we don't have high turnover, but I'm still constantly looking, 2 years in, for backup plans in case I get fired. I'm always anxious that I'm not doing enough or that something is going to come along to pull the rug out from under me. Objectively, I can see that everything's stable. We don't fire people often, people don't quit often. I'm paid well, my boss is an okay guy. But that anxiety from the old job is like stepping in tar. I can try to scrape it off, but it just sort of gets all over everything. Story 15. For me, 3 words. Toxic military leadership. The things that being in the military does to your psyche is one of the biggest reasons that each branch has different ways to seek and get help. It's also one of the reasons they have yearly training on how to help and get help. That being said, I didn't quit. Sometimes in the military, there are people who feel like they are in charge and will do and say things to make you feel like you are not in charge or just feel worthless and incompetent. Very recently, I received praise and recognition for a job well done, But that one person who thinks he's in charge just because he's a higher rank didn't like me, so he started to throw his rank around, call me useless, and try to tell me my place or how to do my job only because I was a lower rank. If you're in the military, don't be that person. If you're in my position, get help. Talk to someone. Story 16. I left my office job in November and never looked back. I had a breaking point one day when I left to take my lunch and had a complete breakdown. I came back from lunch, immediately went home, came into the office on Monday, and quit. Story 17. I was employed with a company for nearly 7 years, the last 2 of which I seriously planned my suicide within the walls of the place. I picked out a time, a location, and a method. Of the 7 years employed, I had various positions and shifts. The last 2 years saw a very dramatic downturn. Upper management was being switched or removed, employee perks and amenities were being taken away, hours were increasing, workload was increasing, and morale was through the floor. A year later, I'm at a new job but still suffering the effects of the old job. I'm not used to thanks and praise that are genuine. I believe it's called imposter syndrome. It's certainly taking time to adapt, but my job is meaningful, and most of my coworkers are decent people, except for my boss, who is young and impatient. Story 18. Oh God, yes. I used to work at a place where I would literally cry on my way there every morning, and I was in my 30s. And I'm not a crier. There was terrible micromanaging. They would even ask you to work off the clock. I hated it with a passion. Story 19. I was a teacher and I absolutely wanted to harm myself. The government, senior leaders, parents, and the public all seem out to get you, and it's awful. I hated it. Story 20. Feel free to fact-check me on this. You are able to file for unemployment if you quit your job due to a toxic work environment. To answer your question, absolutely. Anything from long hours, shift start and end time, work-life balance, workplace culture, and so on can take a toll on mental health and overall well-being. Story 21. I worked at a bank opening loans and accounts, and my boss was despicable. He was always pushing us to open accounts and loans to people who couldn't afford them because he knew the bank would make money sapping them with late fees and overdraft fees and such. It made me physically ill to prepare for work every morning, and I drank almost every night when I came home. It was exhausting, and when I finally got a different job, I was so happy to leave, even though the new job was for less money. Story 22. Sorry, not a man, but this question hits close to home and I need to say my piece. I'm on medication because of my call center office job. I've wanted to quit for over a year but couldn't afford to live if I did. I ended up diagnosed with depression and generalized anxiety disorder after 4 years. I'm 24, no previous mental health issues, make a lot of money, almost $30 per hour with no post-secondary education, so no issue with pay. But the boss is an overbearing micromanager, customers are toxic and entitled. There's no sense of advancement or achievement, nothing to accomplish every day, and you never get to feel like your job is over since it's just a never-ending stream of calls. No one encourages you, recognizes you for your work, or even cares that you tried. All they care about is how many and how long and what time you clock in. I'd quit in a heartbeat if I had the education to work literally anywhere else and make the same money. I catch myself fantasizing about working retail, if only they paid more than minimum wage. I'd love to work somewhere where I get to talk to people who aren't inherently upset. Sure, you get the odd one, but I work complaints every day, all day right now. Anyway, after 4 years, my brain just forgot how to make serotonin on its own. So now I have to put it in there with a pill every morning and hope that when I get to my desk, I don't spend the day thinking about killing myself. About how my life doesn't matter because I never do anything meaningful and I never will as long as I'm here. About how I'm stuck here because of my financial burdens and the desperate need to make sure my family is proud of me, since it's a good job with benefits that they can brag about to their friends. The medication helps, and so does being able to talk to coworkers who are pretty much all going through the same thing or have been there because of this job. If your job really fills you with this much despair and you can find a way out, if you don't have overwhelming debt and it's feasible to leave, don't try to suck it up. A job can absolutely ruin your mental health. No one deserves to feel the way I do every day. You work to survive, but living is more important than surviving. Try to prioritize that if you can. Story 23. I've worked a job with a terrible boss, in a program that I felt was not organized well, for a company where I didn't feel appreciated. I was pretty miserable and I coped by stress eating and gained 15 pounds. I take responsibility for dealing with it poorly by stress eating, but it definitely affected my mental health. I found a new job that was also a promotion,